Sumerian mythology is the oldest of the world mythologies. The mythology with the oldest known written texts to date is Sumerian mythology. Who were the most important gods of this ancient mythology? What were the Anunnaki and Igigis? How was the earth and the universe created? Was there life after death? What was the story of Gilgamesh, the oldest epic in history? How did the great flood of Noah take place according to Sumerian mythology? Let's continue by looking at the answers to these questions and more. In Sumerian mythology, the gods took the form of human beings and possessed all human qualities except death. Sumerian tablets record that these gods had human emotions, such as eating, drinking, marrying, having children, getting sick, getting injured, fighting, and getting angry. In addition, they did not always achieve what they wanted and acted on their goals through various plans or cunning. Although they mostly resembled humans, there were also gods with various animal-human hybrid forms. In the Sumerian region, each city had a god that stood out and protected that city. As the city gained military and political power, its patron god was also elevated. Thus, he was also worshipped and respected in other cities. According to the Sumerians, the god of any city resided in the ziggurat, the temple established in his name. It was believed that the god played a pivotal role in the city's development and growth in every field, was responsible for the safety, livelihood, peace, and happiness of the people. His influence extended beyond his own city, as he was known to visit temples in other cities. In addition, each god protected the interests of his city and acted as its spokesman when the gods gathered. They only dealt with important matters and communicated with great kings or priests. The Sumerians thought the city gods did not have enough time to care for everyone. For this reason, they believed each family had its own guardian god who cared for the family's troubles. Every member of the society was required to construct sacred temples for the gods, present offerings to them, and partake in the ceremonies and rituals. Those seeking the gods' counsel on any matter had to seek the priest's intervention, who were the only ones capable of communicating with the gods. In Sumerian mythology, almost everything one saw, felt, thought, and imagined had a god. However, not all of them were equal or had similar characteristics. For example, it was impossible to put Utu, the sun god, and Enten, the patron god of animals and farmers, in the same category. Within the vast pantheon of Sumerian gods, 7 stood out, distinguished from all others. These 7 held a position of unparalleled significance, their roles and powers setting them apart. Some deities served and assisted the gods. Let us make a detailed introduction to Sumerian mythology by talking about the 7 great gods of the Sumerians. The word An, called An in Sumerian, and Anu in Akkadian, meant sky, and the sky god was called An. He was considered the greatest god. However, he was born from the union of Anshar, the first god, and Kishar, the first goddess. In cuneiform tablets, he was referred to as the father of the gods. He had more abstract characteristics compared to other gods. The most important gods, Enlil, Enki, and Inanna, were the children of An. Although the god An was worshipped in all cities, he was most worshipped in Uruk, which was at its political and cultural peak. Also, the city of Uruk was the patron deity. Depicted with a horned crown, An was a judge who regulated the relationship between all the gods. One of the greatest gods was Enlil, the son of An by his wife Ki. Enlil, also known as the god of air, was the god of the earth. He had started all life on earth and he ruled over it. He was the one who planted the seeds of happiness for people and made them grow. He gave the Sumerian kings the land they ruled. If he did not like a king, he would mobilize the other kings against the king he did not like and end his rule. Enlil was most worshipped in Nippur and was the city's patron god. Enlil's main weapons were floods and hurricanes. He sent the flood to the earth when he thought people needed to be sacrificed. Ninlil, the goddess of wind, was Enlil's wife. Their children were Nergal, the god of war, Nana, the moon god, and Ninurta, the god of agriculture. Another of the greatest gods is Enki, the god of wisdom. He was the son of the sky god, and by the creator goddess Namnu, he was the patron god of the city of Eridu. His most important characteristic is that he is wise and has a sharp mind. He handled all his affairs with his wisdom and cunning. That is why he was called the cunning god Enki. He was also known as the god of creation, intelligence, the sea, and rivers. He was the god who helped all people solve their problems. When the great flood was about to happen, Enki would help people. Marduk, the patron god of Babylon and considered the greatest god of Babylonian mythology, which continues Sumerian mythology, was Enki's son. Ninhursag, also known as the Mother Goddess or Mother Earth, is the goddess of fertility, mountains, and all rulers. Her name literally means Goddess of the Mountain Range. Ninhursag was the wife of Enki, one of the greatest gods. It was believed that she gave birth to many of the gods of Sumerian mythology and was the mother of them all. Some kings even said that Ninhursag breastfed them. This not only increased kings' political power and authority, but also gave kings religious power and created the perception of superhuman qualities. She was most worshipped in the city of Adap. The Sumerians regarded our satellite, the moon, as a god. They called this moon god Nana. Only later in the Babylonian period did the name Sin become more common and recognized. Nana was born to Enlil and his wife Ninlil. He was most worshipped in Ur and was the city's patron god. He was known as the time's ruler and the calendar's lord. He also intervened in and punished kings' wrongdoings. He was believed to have been born underground and to be in constant struggle with demons. Ningal, known as the Great Queen and the patron goddess of the city of Ur, was the wife of Nana. Their children were Inanna, the goddess of love, war, fertility, and Utu, the sun god. Like the moon, the sun was also considered a god by the Sumerians. The sun god was called Utu in Sumerian mythology and Shamash in Babylonian mythology, but he is more commonly known as Shamash today. Utu was also known as the god of justice, law, and order. He could see everything that happened in the whole world. At night, he entered the underworld through the western gate of the earth, and at sunrise, he returned to the earth through the eastern gate. Utu, the sun god, was worshipped mostly in Larsa during the Sumerian period and was the son of Nana, the moon god. Nana, the moon god, had a daughter. This daughter was Inanna, the goddess of love, war, and fertility. There was a temple dedicated to Inanna in the city of Uruk. After An, the patron god of the city, she was the most worshipped. It was believed that she could deceive even Enki, the most cunning god of Sumerian mythology. Under the name Ishtar, she became one of the most popular goddesses during the Babylonian and Assyrian periods. She is also mentioned in many mythological stories written on tablets. The most important of these stories is her marriage to Dumuzid, the king of Uruk. Their relationship is mentioned a lot. Later, Dumuzid was recognized as a god and became known as the god of shepherds. Dumuzid is even mentioned in the Torah and is known to be called Tammuz. In Sumerian mythology, all the gods born and multiplied from the greatest god, An, and his consort Ki, were called Anunnaki. Enlil was the greatest god of the Anunnaki, and in time he became even greater than his father An. There are two different views on the word meaning for Anunnaki. First, the word that begins with the name of An, the greatest god, may mean descendant of An. The second, and more widely accepted, is that the word for the greatest god, An, means sky. His consort, Ki, means earth. Anunnaki could mean those between the sky and the earth. So, the group of all the gods and goddesses was called Anunnaki. The Igigis, considered a subgroup of the Anunnaki, were described as celestial and divine beings. The main characteristic of the Igigis is that they are celestial beings and live in the sky. They are more frequently mentioned in stories, especially in Babylonian mythology. According to mythology, both Anunnakis and Igigis existed before humans were created. They were tasked with serving the first gods, An and Ki, their ancestors, Anshar and Kishar. Then Enki, the son of An, protested against the gods serving the gods and said that the first humans should be created. With the creation of humans, the gods began to be served by humans. Thus, the Anunnakis entered the retinue of the god Enlil, and later of Ereshkigal, the goddess of the realm of the dead, ruled the earth and the underworld. The Igigis, the other hand, settled in the sky under the god An. So, what was the earth like, and what kind of life awaited people after death? According to the Sumerians, the earth consisted of a piece of land surrounded by the sea and covered with mountains. The sky, in the form of a dome, surrounded this land and the sea. But they could not explain how this dome could stay in the sky. Beneath the ground lay fresh water, which they called Apsu, and existed before everything else. This fresh water came up out of the ground in the form of rivers, springs, and lakes that gave life to human beings. Apsu, a huge body of water, existed before creating the earth and sky. One day, the god Enlil fought against a huge female serpent that was in league with Apsu, killed it, and created the earth with one half of his body and the sky with the other half. The stars, the moon, and the sun moved in their own path in the firmament. There were two gates to the east and west of the earth. In the evening, the sun god Utu descended into the underworld through the gate in the west, and at the morning horizon, he ascended back to the earth through the gate in the east. Sometimes he made this journey in a chariot drawn by 2 horses and sometimes on foot. Sometimes Utu, the sun god, and the other gods met in the heavens beyond the sky, beyond the invisible firmament. However, for events that would determine the fate of people, they would come together on earth to form a council. The Sumerians thought everyone would suffer the same fate, good or bad, when they died. According to them, only the gods could live in heaven. All mortal people would go to the land of the dead without hope of a joyful life. They gave the land of the dead many names. Sumerian words like Kur, Irkala, Kuku, Arali, and Kigel described it. Deep in the underworld, beneath the earth's deep crust, the land of the dead was a huge cave. Its walls were really strong, carefully watched, and very well guarded. Once you entered the land of the dead, with its 7 gates and 7 judges, there was no chance of returning. It was a very dark and gloomy place. All the dead lived a miserable life here. The land of the dead was always dark, and the light of day never came. Dust was everywhere, and the only thing the dead could eat was dust and mud. So whether you were a king, noble or commoner, rich or poor, even righteous or unrighteous, there would be no distinction between you in the afterlife, and you would be relegated to the same level as everyone else. The goddess Ereshkigal ruled the land of the dead. One day, Ereshkigal fell in love with Nergal, the god of disease, who descended to the land of the dead. However, Nergal found an excuse and left. Ereshkigal threatened that if Nergal did not come back to him, he would release all the dead to the earth. So Nergal disarms the 7 gates and 7 judges of the land of the dead, arrives at Ereshkigal's side, and decides to destroy him. However, Ereshkigal begs Nergal and says that they can rule the land of the dead if he marries her. Nergal accepts this offer, and from then on, they rule the land of the dead together. Even though the Sumerians thought they would live hell, they were very attentive to funeral ceremonies. If a funeral was not organized for a deceased person and the body was not buried, the spirit of the deceased person would wander the earth. This not only meant that the deceased person would suffer, but also that this spirit could turn into a ghost, which they called Edimu. Sumerian sorcerers could use these ghosts to harm people. According to Sumerian mythology, how was the creation of the universe and humans accomplished? According to the story, once upon a time, before everything was created, the universe was a dark and watery mass. Two creatures turned it into chaos. One was Apsu, meaning deep sea, which formed the water, and the other was Tiamat, a gigantic, snake-shaped creature called Mother Universe. In some stories, she is also known as Omorka. Then the first gods began to manifest in these waters. The first god born was Anshar, meaning all the sky, and his wife Kishar, meaning all the earth. From them were born An and Ki, meaning sky and earth. Enlil, Enki, and all the other gods born after them began to multiply from their descendants. Apsu and Tiamat in the dark waters became disturbed by the birth and reproduction of the gods in these waters. Then they decided to destroy the gods and created a huge army of monsters. Among the gods, Enlil, the grandson of Anshar, the son of An, came forward and fought against the army of monsters. After defeating them, he confronted the great snake, Tiamat. The god Enlil, who managed to kill her, too cut Tiamat's body in two. He created the earth with one half and the sky with the other. Thus, the beginning of a universe conducive to life was created. Then he placed his son Nana, the moon god, and his son Utu, the sun god, on the firmament to create the seasons and provide light for the universe. With this, he shaped the earth and created animals, plants, and people. Let us continue with the greatest epic of the Sumerians, the Epic of Gilgamesh, of which only about 60% of the stories have survived. Gilgamesh was the ruler of the Uruk dynasty, who lived between 2900 and 2700 BC. Known for being adventurous and brave, as well as seeking fame, glory, and immortality, Gilgamesh was eventually deified by the Sumerian people. So much so that they thought that 2/3 of his body was God, and only 1/3 was human. They even said that his mother was the goddess Ninsun, and his father was the previous king, Lugalbanda. There is a very strange story about Gilgamesh becoming king. According to this story, Gilgamesh's grandfather, Enmerkar, the king of Uruk, learned one day from a fortune teller that his grandson would kill him and take the kingdom from him. So he imprisons his daughter in a tower to prevent her from having children and puts a guard over her. Despite these precautions, his daughter became pregnant and had a son 9 months later. When the watchman sees the baby, he throws the baby down the tower for fear that the king will kill him. At that moment, an eagle flying under the tower sees the baby and takes it on its back and leaves it near a date palm orchard. The gardener, who encountered a baby in his garden, took the baby home, and he and his wife named him Gilgamesh, which means all-seeing and all-knowing. When Gilgamesh grows up and becomes a young man, he leaves the gardener and travels from city to city. During this time, he learns to read and write, becomes a man who advises people. One day, his path falls into the city of Uruk, and he wanders around admiringly. When he comes to the market square, he stands like a statue and sees people looking at him. He looks at them. One of the elders of the city says, "Our king is dead. He has no son. This young man with his big body and good looks is just like a king for us. Let's make him our king." The people agree. The elders tell Gilgamesh that they want to make him king. He immediately agrees because he does not want to miss this opportunity. Then they take him to the palace, dress him, surround him, and put him on the throne. So Gilgamesh becomes the king of the city of Uruk. Some of the tablets that tell the Epic of Gilgamesh are missing or broken, so it is impossible to know the whole epic. Moreover, the epic is more poetic than narrative. For this reason, while telling the Gilgamesh epic, I will be inspired by the book Gilgamesh, the First King Hero in History, written by Turkish Sumerologist and writer Muazzez İlmiye Çığ. For this reason, slight differences may be seen. One day, a hunter was hunting when he saw a creature covered with hair walking on two legs among the animals. He could not understand what this creature was. Even the lion next to him seemed to be friends with it. The creature was also dismantling the traps the hunter had set to catch the animals one by one. The hunter was so frightened that he and the animals began to watch secretly as this creature drank water from the river's edge. When he looked more carefully, he realized this creature was human. But he was still scared because this human being was acting like the animals and moving with them. Then the hunter ran back to his father. When his father saw his son returning empty-handed and frightened, he realized he had encountered some danger and asked him what had happened. The hunter told his father exactly what he had seen. His father was very curious about this wild man, and a day later, they went to the river to see him again. Again, they set their traps near the river, hid, and waited for the animals to come. The animals appeared in the distance. They were coming to the river again to drink water. The wild man came ahead, broke the traps again, and they drank their water, went back the way they had come. The hunter's father agreed with his son. The human being they had seen was unlike any other before. Then an idea came to him. Gilgamesh, their king, was a very powerful man, and no man was equal to him. Therefore, he had no friends. But this wild man they had seen could be Gilgamesh's friend. But there was a problem. This wild man had to be trained and humanized. Only one of the priestesses in the temple of the goddess Inanna could do this. The hunter immediately went to the temple and told the priestesses, who sent a priestess named Shamhat to do the job. Shamhat was a very beautiful woman who could seduce men. The hunter explained everything to her repeatedly and told her about the danger of the situation. Shamhat was very confident, and they all went back to the river. According to the plan, Shamhat was hidden from view behind a tree and began to play and sing with his lyre in his hand. His voice was beautiful, and all the forest birds accompanied him with their chirping. The animals and the wild man were approaching the river again. As soon as the man heard the sound, he stopped, listened, and started walking toward her. He saw a woman singing behind a tree. It was the first time he had ever seen such a creature. Then he sat down beside her with the animals and continued listening to her. The animals got bored and scattered, but he didn't stop listening to her. Then he came closer to her. They took each other's hands and hugged. The man had never felt such a feeling before. Now his human side had come out. He had forgotten about the animals and would not leave Shamhat's side. Shamhat named him Enkidu, which means man of the fields, and taught him to say his name. Then he washed him in the river, cut his hair and beard. He also dressed him in the clothes he had brought with him. So Enkidu became like a strong, handsome city man. Then Shamhat taught him how to eat, drink, love, and talk. Enkidu understood everything at once. After many days, Enkidu was now a full-fledged city dweller. Shamhat decided to take him to the city of Uruk. He persuaded him to go by saying, "No one has ever been able to oppose the power of our handsome king Gilgamesh." Enkidu said he could stand up to him and was stronger than him. Together, they set off for Uruk. Meanwhile, Gilgamesh was telling his mother about a dream he had at night. He said that a star fell before him like a stone, that he could not move it, and that everyone kissed it. Again, in his dream, he said that his mother equated Gilgamesh with the stone. According to her mother's interpretation of the dream, they would meet someone as strong as Gilgamesh and of his caliber. Her mother would love this person as much as Gilgamesh, and they would become good friends. That day, there was a festival in Uruk. It was the beginning of a new year. People laughed and had fun. Shamhat and Enkidu waded into the crowd. When they came to the market square, all the people surrounded them. How much like Gilgamesh, our king, looks, they thought. They heard all the rumors about Enkidu. Who was stronger, King Gilgamesh or Enkidu? Then Gilgamesh appeared in all his majesty as he made his way to the square. But he was unaware of what was happening, because he had spent many happy hours with the priestess Nindada. Enkidu started walking towards Gilgamesh. The people were in a frenzy. Enkidu and Gilgamesh collided chest in chest. The king ignored this, and Enkidu blocked his path with his foot when he wanted to continue on his way. Gilgamesh, now angry, first tried to push him away. He tried to grab and knock him to the ground when he failed, but that didn't work either. Then they both embraced and began to struggle. It was as if the ground was trembling, but they were neither beaten nor defeated. Just as Gilgamesh's foot stumbled and Enkidu was about to knock him down, he grabbed him by the hand and pulled him to his feet. So this time they embraced as friends and realized they could not defeat each other. After that, their friendship began. From that day on, Gilgamesh was free from boredom because he had found a friend who was equal to himself, and the people were at peace. Gilgamesh was happy with his new friend, but he was still looking for something to do. He told Enkidu about Humbaba, the monster who lived in the cedar forests, and said he wanted to kill him. Enkidu knew about this monster. He would not leave his friend Gilgamesh alone in this adventure, and would make sure that he added to his glory. But he warned him anyway. He said that those who entered the forest where this monster lived could never leave, that the monster's roar was like a deluge, and that it spewed fire from its mouth. Gilgamesh knew all this, but he wanted his name to live forever. He could do that if he killed this monster. Even if he died, they would say that he died fighting Humbaba, so that his name could live forever. They took up their weapons, and in the town square, the people welcomed them because they were going to kill the monster Humbaba. But they were afraid that King Gilgamesh would die. So, a few orphaned youths joined him to help him. Finally, his mother, the goddess Ninsun, told him that she loved Enkidu like a son and entrusted Gilgamesh to his care. She gave them both a necklace to protect them from evil. Then she called the sun god Utu and asked him to help her son. They set off together. They had 7 mountains to overcome. The journey would take days. Meanwhile, Gilgamesh began to wonder if he would succeed, and one night he jumped up from his sleep. He asked Enkidu to interpret his dream. In his dream, he saw a bull and knelt before it. The bull put his arm around him and gave him water to drink. Enkidu told him that the bull in this dream was Utu, the sun god. His arm around them meant that he would help them, and his giving them water meant that he would honor Gilgamesh. After traveling for some time, Gilgamesh dreamed again. This time, he dreamed that a mountain had caught and knocked him down, but a beautiful man had pulled him out from under the mountain and saved him. Enkidu, who also commented on this dream, said they would kill Humbaba and everything would end. But this time, Enkidu was filled with fear, and Gilgamesh gave him courage. Then they continued on their way, and before they knew it, they were near the cedar forests where the monster lived. Humbaba realized that Gilgamesh had come to his forest and blew through the trees to put him to sleep. His companions did not realize anything and thought that Gilgamesh had fallen asleep alone. Gilgamesh slept for many days. Then Enkidu and the others decided to wake him up. They could not understand why he had slept for so long. When they woke him up, Gilgamesh did not understand what had happened and wanted to go on to kill the beast. The forest was so dense that moving forward required cutting down trees. As they cleared a path, Humbaba realized they were approaching and began to roar. The ground shook as he roared. Nevertheless, they kept moving forward. Then, a storm broke out in the forest, and dust was everywhere. Gilgamesh knew that Utu, the sun god, had done this to help. Because Humbaba was bewildered by this storm and confronted Gilgamesh. On top of this confusion, he was knocked down by Gilgamesh's punch. Enkidu immediately jumped on him and tied him tightly. Humbaba begged Gilgamesh, telling him that he would not harm people and that if he did not kill him, he would be his slave. Gilgamesh believed him with a compassionate heart and asked Enkidu not to kill him. But Enkidu said that he was a monster, that he was lying, and that if he was released, he would kill them all. So he raised his sword and killed Humbaba with a single blow, severing his head. As they were about to put his severed head in a bag and return, Enkidu had an idea. He offered Gilgamesh the chance to cut down the most magnificent tree in the forest and make a beautiful gate for the temple of the god Enlil in Nippur. Gilgamesh liked this offer because the god Enlil, who was in charge of the forests, might be angry with them for killing Humbaba. So they cut down a magnificent tree and returned to Uruk with Humbaba's head. The people were excitedly waiting for them in the city square. The bag was opened in front of everyone. Inside was the terrible head of Humbaba, the monster who had frightened the people for so many years. There was great joy among the people. They were saying to Gilgamesh that you are our city's greatest hero. They also had good words for Enkidu, so Gilgamesh was now a great hero. After the adventure of Humbaba, Gilgamesh was a hero not only in the eyes of the people, but also in the eyes of the gods and goddesses. Now he was very happy. He had made his name known even in the neighboring cities, and his name would live forever. He could now live with his friend Enkidu as he pleased. They traveled, had fun, and hunted together. Their friendship became legendary everywhere. But it seemed that their happiness would not last long. The goddess Inanna had her eye on Gilgamesh. She was impressed that he was both a king and a hero. The goddess, dressed in her finest clothes, adorned herself with necklaces made of precious stones. Then she went to Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was astonished to see the goddess Inanna standing before him. Why could this great goddess have come to him? She was so beautiful that he could not take his eyes off her. Then he asked what he could do for her. Inanna told Gilgamesh that she liked him and wanted to marry him. Gilgamesh wondered why a goddess who ruled the earth and sky would want to marry him. And he couldn't trust her because she had seduced so many men and then left them like empty sacks. He didn't want that for himself. Then, not wanting to anger the goddess, he answered her kindly. He said that she honored him, but that he was the king of a small city, and how could he be the husband of a goddess? The goddess Inanna told Gilgamesh that if he married her, she would give him a chariot made of gold, covered with precious stones. He would bow down before kings and nobles. Gifts would rain down from everywhere, and abundance would come to his city. Gilgamesh was very angry with the goddess. He was sure that one day she would let him down like other men. Then he again gave an appropriate answer. He said that what the goddess had given him was very valuable, but that he had nothing to give her in return. The goddess then said she only wanted him to marry her and did not expect anything in return. Gilgamesh didn't know how to respond, but he couldn't stand it any longer and blurted it out. He told the goddess that he had abandoned his lovers after a while, that he had turned some of them into animals, others into beasts of burden, that he had even made his ex-husband Dumuzi groan in the underworld, and that he only wanted to be friends with him. The goddess Inanna got very angry and said to Gilgamesh, "Who are you to turn down the offer of a goddess like me? I will make you pay for this," and stormed off. The goddess Inanna immediately went to the sky god An. She told him that Gilgamesh had refused her marriage proposal, that she was very angry with him, wanted to destroy Gilgamesh and the city of Uruk, asked him to give her the bull of heaven. An, the sky god, told Inanna that if she gave her the bull of heaven, there would be 7 years of famine in the whole Sumerian region, so he did not want to give it to her. Inanna got angry again and threatened that if she did not give the bull of heaven, she would release all the dead to the earth. An, who did not want this, thus lowered the bull of heaven to the earth. Suddenly, the bull started killing people and burning the city of Uruk to the ground. Gilgamesh and Enkidu could not remain silent. No one could stand up to this bull but them. They both jumped on the bull and grabbed him by the collar. Then they managed to kill him with their swords. Seeing this, Inanna called out to Gilgamesh over a wall and said, "Woe to the one who kills the bull of heaven! I will give him a great punishment." Enkidu cut off one of the bull's legs and threw it at Inanna, and she left in great anger. Gilgamesh and Enkidu were very happy again. They had made a name for themselves and saved the city of Uruk from great trouble. After the events, Enkidu had a dream that night and told Gilgamesh about it. In his dream, he saw the gods An, Enlil, Enki, and Utu talking. The sky god An wanted to punish them for killing the bull of heaven, one had to die, and An thought it should be Gilgamesh. Enlil wanted Enkidu to die. Utu, the sun god, questioned why one had to die, because I helped them. The two friends began to grieve together. Gilgamesh tried to console them, pointing out that not all dreams come true, but his heart was eating him up inside. Meanwhile, the goddess Inanna was seeking revenge. She too wanted Enkidu to die, because then Gilgamesh would suffer and Enkidu would pay for the bull's leg he threw. One day, Enkidu fell ill. He was in pain. Gilgamesh stayed by his bedside and felt sorry for him. Neither medicine nor doctors could find a cure. One night, Enkidu dreamed again that a bird swooped down on him and took him to the land of the dead. So Gilgamesh's efforts were in vain, and Enkidu was now waiting for death. On the one hand, he complained to Shamhat, the priestess who had brought him from the forest. And, on the other hand, he was angry with the gate he had built for the god Enlil, and angry with Enlil for letting him be in this state. Then he began to pray to Utu, who had helped him before. He asked Utu that the hunter who saw him in the forest would not be able to hunt again, that Shamat, who took him out of the forest, would not have children, and that both would be unhappy. Utu answered Enkidu. He told Enkidu not to be angry with them, that the hunter had been instrumental in his meeting with Shamhat, and that Shamhat had raised him as a human being and made him a friend of King Gilgamesh. He said that he had become the best friend of a hero like Gilgamesh, and that he was a hero like him. Thinking about these things, Enkidu calmed down. What the god Utu had said was true. If he had not met them, he would have died like an animal and been forgotten. He prayed to Utu again and said he regretted it, this time asking for favors for Shamhat. As a result, Enkidu's illness increased, and one day he closed his eyes, never to open them again. Gilgamesh fell on his friend, wept for 7 days and nights. As goddess Inanna wanted, Enkidu died, leaving Gilgamesh in pain and unable to see anything. Then he decided to pray to the gods to see his friend again, just once. First, he prayed to the god Enlil, but Enlil did not pay attention. Then he called out to the moon god Nana, but she paid no heed either. Finally, he told Enki, the god who loved to help people. Enki told him that no one who goes to the land of the dead could come out of there, even for a short time, but that the sun god Utu could open a hole in the underworld, and through this hole he could see the shadow of his friend Enkidu for a short time. He convinced the sun god Utu to make this happen. Then Enkidu's shadow briefly appeared to Gilgamesh, and they began to talk. Gilgamesh was very happy to hear his friend's voice. He asked him what had happened in the land of the dead, and what kind of life he was leading. Enkidu was very unhappy. He said that insects and maggots were eating his body. He said that the ground was covered with mud and that they fed on dust and dirt. Gilgamesh suddenly shuddered inside. He thought, "Is this where I will live when I die? No, I must not die, and I must find immortality." He could only say to Enkidu, "So there is a completely different life there." After talking for a while longer, they exchanged their last farewells and had to part, never to see each other again. After this conversation, Gilgamesh had a new problem. The fear of death had gripped his whole body, and he had to find immortality by any means necessary. Gilgamesh threw himself into the wilderness. He forgot about his friend's death and began to think about his death. He had heard that in ancient times, after the flood sent by the gods to destroy mankind, a man named Utnapishtim had achieved immortality. He got dressed and set out. Now, he had neither his people nor the city of Uruk on his mind. He had to find Utnapishtim, learn the mystery of immortality, add heroism to his heroism, and live forever like the gods. For days and nights, he walked over mountains and hills. His destination was far away, and he was miserable. One day, as he was passing through the forest, Gilgamesh was confronted by a huge lion and did not know what to do. When the lion suddenly pounced on him, he shook a fist at him. After 2 or 3 more blows, the lion collapsed and could no longer get up. While Gilgamesh was looking for immortality, It seemed wrong for him to take the lion's life, and he continued without killing it. Again, one day he was confronted by twin mountains. He could not see that there was a passage between these two mountains, so he had to climb up. When he climbed up, he saw a door and a man who looked like a scorpion. Gilgamesh was stunned and did not know what to say. Then the scorpion man called out to his wife, "Lady, look! Someone has come to us. He has the flesh of a god on his body." His wife said, "I know. He is 2/3 god and 1/3 man." Gilgamesh could not understand what he was hearing. This time, the scorpion man turned to Gilgamesh and asked, "Why did you, one of the gods, come all the way here?" Gilgamesh replied that he was looking for Utnapishtim and would ask him how he became immortal. The scorpion man laughed and said it was dark behind the door and there was no way to reach him. When Gilgamesh, in sadness and pain, said that he wanted to go there no matter what, the scorpion man could not bear it, so he opened the door and let him go. Gilgamesh entered the door, but it was dark inside. He traveled in the darkness for days without realizing whether it was day or night. One day, he saw a light at the end of the road. When he reached the light, he could not believe his eyes. Inside was a garden full of colorful, shining stones. He could not take his eyes off these precious stones. This was the garden of the sun god, but Gilgamesh had to keep going. Another day, he reached the sea and saw a building by the sea. The door was half open, and he went inside. It was a drinking house, and inside was a woman named Siduri. She saw Gilgamesh and was afraid. She didn't recognize Gilgamesh, who was covered in dirt. His hair and beard mingled. He looked unhappy. When Gilgamesh introduced himself, she asked him why he was like this. He said that his friend had died, and he was very sad about it. He said that he did not want to die like him, and that he was looking for Utnapishtim, who had found immortality. When Siduri told Gilgamesh that he had traveled so far and wasted so much time in vain for immortality, which he could never attain, and that he should spend the rest of his life having fun, Gilgamesh asked Siduri to tell him where Utnapishtim was so that he could see him. Siduri explained that he had to cross the great sea ahead of him and the impassable water of death in the depths. He took Gilgamesh to a boatman to carry him across the sea. The boatman carried Gilgamesh across the sea to the water of death, but they had to be very careful here, and Gilgamesh had to row without touching the water with his hands. As they traveled further, the sky became invisible, and it became as dark as night. When Gilgamesh was almost exhausted, Utnapishtim appeared. When they reached him, Utnapishtim asked Gilgamesh who he was, why he had come here, and why he was in this state. Gilgamesh told him everything. He said that his friend Enkidu had died, that he felt sorry for him, that he did not want to die like him, and that for this reason he had come to Utnapishtim and wanted to know how he had gained immortality. Utnapishtim looked at him with pity and began asking questions that proved this request could never happen. "Gilgamesh, have you ever seen a house built that will never be destroyed? Can the inheritance that brothers divide be theirs forever? Does a river always overflow, or does the sun always appear in the sky? The gods have created life and death together. What can you do?" Gilgamesh told Utnapishtim, "You are no different from me, but you have achieved immortality and entered among the gods. How could you get immortality?" Utnapishtim told Gilgamesh that immortality was a great secret, but that he would reveal it to him because he had come this far. Gilgamesh then had great hope and began to listen to him. According to Utnapishtim, Utnapishtim was once king of Shuruppak, which still exists on the banks of the Euphrates. One day, and the father of the gods, along with the god Enlil and his son Ninurta, gathered together and decided to create a flood that would destroy their creation, especially humans. Meanwhile, Enki, the god of wisdom sitting in the corner, heard all this and did not like what he heard. Then Enki called Utnapishtim, "Do you hear me, son of Ubartutu, the man of Shuruppak?" Utnapishtim heard Enki and was very excited. It was a great honor for him to have God speak to him. When he told Enki that he had heard him, Enki continued. He told Utnapishtim that the gods wanted to destroy all humanity and living creatures with a flood, and he could not stop it. He told him that he had heard Utnapishtim while he was praying, and that he would guide him to save at least some living beings. He immediately asked him to sell all his property, possessions, and build a large ship. He told him to make it equal in width, length, and to cover it so that no water could get inside. Utnapishtim needed his people's help to build the ark, but he did not tell them that the gods were going to send a flood so that the people would not be alarmed. He got the people's help by telling them that the god Enki had called him and that he had to build an ark. The ark was almost the width of a whole field, and its height was equivalent to the length of 20 reeds. It was also oiled and tarred on the outside to make it watertight. Despite being so big, the ship's construction was completed in 7 days. Thanks to the poles placed underneath, it was easily lowered into the water. Utnapishtim still had not told his people the truth. First, he placed the gold and silver inside the ship. He put some of the animals into the ship in pairs. Then, he took the craftsman and all his relatives into the ship. When the ship was full, the sun god Utu called out to the king, told him to close the door when the wind and rain started. That is exactly what happened at night, and the door of the ship was closed. A sailor named Puzuramuri took the helm of the ship. Outside, a storm was raging, and lightning flashed as bright as day. It was as if the gods were vomiting out all their anger. When there was no lightning, it was so dark that no one could see each other. The screams of the destroyed people of the city of Shurupak reached their ears. Even the gods on earth, the Anunnaki, were so frightened by this flood that they fled to the sky to end the father of the gods and regretted what they had done. The flood continued for 6 days and 7 nights. On the 7th day, the storm subsided, the sea became calm, and the flood stopped. Utnapishtim opened the ship window and looked out. The sunlight shone on his face. The sea was calm, but all other creatures had disappeared. Then the king looked around, looking for land, but he could not see it. He flew a pigeon to see if he could find land, but the dove returned because it could not find a place to land. After a while, this time, he released a swallow into the air. It too came back, but its feet were muddy. A third time, he sent a crow. The crow must have found a place to land and food this time because it had not returned. Just then, a rising landmass was seen. The sailor turned the helm towards the land, and the ship ran aground after a while. This was Mount Nisir. Utnapishtim sacrificed and burned incense here. Then the gods came to the survivors. Only Enlil was not seen among them because he had planned the flood in the first place. Some time passed, and Enlil appeared in the square. He was very angry and wanted to know who had prevented everyone from dying in the flood. His son Ninurta said that only Enki could do it. Enki stormed out and reproached Enlil for causing such a cruel flood. Let the sinner pay for his sin. He who rebels, let him be beheaded. But what is it to create a great flood and destroy everything? He continued. I did not tell the secret of the gods directly. I only made Utnapishtim, the wise one, dream a dream, and he understood. Now go talk to him, Enlil replied. Then Enlil went to Utnapishtim and his wife. He put his hands on their foreheads and blessed them. He said that Utnapishtim and his wife were no longer human beings but gods, and would live at the mouth of the river where the gods lived. With all this, Utnapishtim told Gilgamesh how he had gained immortality. In other words, the gods had given him immortality because of their remorse. However, he tells Gilgamesh that he will not get immortality by saying, "Why would the gods give immortality to you? You must have realized that it was not going to happen." And Gilgamesh returned to his city Uruk, empty-handed in great sorrow. You can subscribe for more content such as ancient history, mythology, ancient civilizations, rulers who shaped history, and you can support the channel with your likes and comments.